Hi, Judy. Thank you so much for joining the podcast today, and I appreciate you taking some time out today to have a chat. I've had a few different professionals on, and one thing that I didn't have, which is so important to a property transaction, is someone from the conveyancing side. So, you're joining us from Contract Conveyancing. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your experience. Give us a bit of a rundown so we know who we're talking to.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. It is my pleasure to be here. So my experience in conveyancing is I've got over 20 years. Conveyancing is all I have ever done. So I've walked straight out of school into uni and worked in law firms doing conveyancing. So the level of experience there is like 20 years worth.
20 years,
There's so much.
Can I ask what made you want to come straight out of high school and then going into conveyancing? I don't know many high schoolers who sort of sit there and say, hey, I want to be a conveyancer. Many of them don't even know what that is.
I didn't. It's actually a funny story. I fell into conveyancing. I didn't know what it was. It was something I did not know. What I wanted to do was work as a waitress in a cafe that I was managing.
Okay, nice.
That was why I was like, yeah, I'm super happy to do this. It was really close to home. Yeah. And my mum was kind of like, no, this is not what we're doing. I found you this interview to go to at this law firm. It's a junior admin assistant. Mm-hmm. I think you should go to this. And it was in Blacktown. And I went, okay, that's okay. Like I'll do it. And so I went and I got the job and I sat at the front desk for a while, and I didn't know anything about anything to do with law. Like as I said, I wasn't an academic at school, so I didn't understand anything. And I kind of learned on the job, and there was a conveyancer in that office.
Gotcha, yeah.
And I would see her, and I was learning about all different areas of law. And so, it got kind of heavy, and it seemed like nobody really won. Like if you were litigating out, nobody was really happy. Family law, nobody was really happy. But every time I walked into the conveyancer's office, she had really happy clients. And so I was like, what is this? What is conveyancing? It feels like a really happy area of law.
I've never thought of it like that. Like I come from a background of law, like I studied law and stuff like this. And I've never thought that's so true, that the conveyancing side is such sort of a positive. We're helping you achieve things, big transactions, purchasing things. And then on the legal side, it's maybe a little bit depressing, where it's everything's a fight and everything's what can we get? So that's a fascinating outlook on that, actually.
And the solicitor was always so cranky, and he never seemed so happy because it kind of can get heavy. And he was old school, so I'm not like, this is again, we're talking like 20 years ago. Yeah. And so it was I was like, but she always seemed so happy. Yeah. And like stressed at times, but I was kind of like, so I got into it, and I loved it. It was just, I picked it up straight away. So then I went to uni to study conveyancing, because it's not a full law degree. It's only anything to do with property.
Right. Yeah.
So anything that touches on property law, you learn at university or.
So conveyancing is it's like a bachelor's degree.
It's not,
or it's a certificate or a diploma, or
it's a certificate and a diploma. Yeah, so you walk out and you have I think it's yours. I forget what it's called, like a certificate of law and practice in conveyancing or something like that. Yeah. Nice. So I did that, and whilst I was still working and in the law firm, and loved it. Like I just love it, and I know it sounds so cliche because everyone's, but I actually love what I do. So when I come to work every day, it doesn't feel like I'm coming into work dragging away. Like I love working in the file. Running a business, different story, maybe not my passion. But working in the business on conveyancing, that is definitely something that fills my bucket every day.
Well, can I ask about the business? So you obviously went to uni, you studied to be a conveyancer. Did you go back to work for a law firm for conveyancer, or did you how did you end up starting a business?
Again, that is something else that I kind of like, just, the opportunity opened. So I got the degree and I worked in conveyancing offices. And then I worked in a law firm for 12 years
Yep.
as a conveyancer in the conveyancing department. And then my boss retired and was selling the practice. And she kind of said to me, look, if this site is something that you want to stay here or will you want to move on? And I kind of went, do you think I could be able to go out on my own? And she was like, yes. Out of everyone I've ever met, I think that you are capable of,
It's good that
going
you
out on
have
your
someone
own.
at work that's promoting that and is
It
wanting
was
to
because, she was a real mentor to me. So, it did. It was a real positive thing. Like it did really help. And I had a lot of support, obviously, around me. It wasn't
yeah.
just her. There was, my husband. He was like, I think you could do this. There was a lot of other people that were supporting me to make that decision. So I went, okay, I'm going to try it. I'm going to go and do it. And I've done it. And I've got a coach. But I think I've got a handle on it. On times, I don't know if anyone else that runs a business, it's kind of like some of the best decision you make. And then on some days it's the worst. And on some days you ride that roller coaster, in the same day. That's how I found myself here.
A lot of my clients have a big burning question of who should I engage? Should I engage a solicitor who's a practicing lawyer in New South Wales or whichever state they're purchasing in? Or should I engage a conveyancer? And I look from a cost perspective, from what I've seen, it's pretty much exactly the same. But I wanted to hear your perspective on if it's appropriate for one or the other, or if it's exactly the same, or what's your perspective on that?
My perspective would be it could be a solicitor or it could be a conveyancer. All right. If it was a solicitor's office, I would recommend going to a law firm that specializes in conveyancing.
Mm-hmm.
Because being conveyancers, it's literally all we do. We cannot do family law. We cannot draft your will. We cannot litigate. We cannot be preoccupied in court with any other matters. Our mindsets and all of our knowledge is centered around property law and conveyancing, everything to do with the transaction. So for clients, if you go to a law firm, just make sure that they specialize in either conveyancing or they have maybe a licensed conveyancer that is handling your matter.
Yeah.
Because what I find with most firms is that they may do conveyancing, but it may be a secretary for the solicitor that's handling your matter, not so much the solicitor. And maybe someone that's not experienced. So they may miss little trips and traps that we kind of go, whoops, nope, like we know how to get around, dodge, and we see coming and things like that. That may be missed if you don't have someone. You may have someone that's experienced. Oh, I've done this for 20 years, but I never got my degree. Well, you have to have both to be able to obviously, do something in the best interest of the client. So that would be what I would recommend, is that we're equally as qualified. As terms of experience, that's something that you might also want to ask is, how much experience do you have? The person that is handling my file, what's their level of experience? That's something else that would really attribute to the experience that you're going to have as a client.
I think you make a good point though, is that is the lawyer or the solicitor is engaged in multiple different things. And I assume that all the things that they're engaged in likely have their own deadlines and their own timings and things like that. And what you want, especially in a property transaction, is that timelines are met. Timelines are so important when it comes to purchasing property. So, as you know, I think to have someone who's so engaged and so locked in to those timelines and to making sure you get the right advice at the appropriate time is really important. And it does. I've used. I didn't want to say this, but maybe I will. But I've used a solicitor before in a property transaction for myself, and sometimes just getting in contact with them. I remember one time we were trying to get in contact with them. weren't available. They were caught that day, and we're just like, okay, well, like they were caught in the morning and they'll call us in the afternoon and stuff like that. So it was very clear to me exactly what you were saying, that they were engaged in other things. Now, they did a great job. They did a fantastic job. We got we got the property and everything was good. They gave good advice. But if you are engaged in someone who's doing that, all day, every day from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. and they're sort of locked in, it gives you a bit more comfort, especially if maybe this might be your first property transaction as well. Which brings me to another question I wanted to ask you about. So we sort of understand the difference between a solicitor and a conveyancer, and the similarities between the two. At what point should you engage a conveyancer? And
I love this question.
I'm glad, because I've seen so many different things, and sometimes I make the wrong assumption that someone may have already contacted a conveyancer. I think I was actually speaking to you about something recently where I assumed that the client had already contacted a legal professional or a conveyancer, and as it turns out, they hadn't, and so we were sort of playing catch up from that point. And so, should you engage them on the word go, hey, I'm looking for a property? Should you engage them after you get finance conditional approval? Should you engage them after you get a contract? What's your thoughts on when you should engage someone?
This is my favorite question, because the more educated everybody is, the better they're going to be in terms of when you do contact us. It is, if for a buyer, my ideal would be as you're looking. So when you're looking, because then I can give you, there are some little tips that I give along the way in terms of helping you go out and be able to be confident around speaking to real estate agents. So that's my ideal, particularly for first home buyers. I like to get them before they've found their property, and then you can step along the way with them. If it's a case where they've maybe heard this information too late, it's okay. The ideal time after that is once your offer has been accepted.
Yep.
And before you sign a contract.
Okay.
That's your next ideal time to contact our office. After that, if you have signed a contract and you've entered into it, that day, that absolute day, if you've gone and signed on the dotted line, you need a conveyancer immediately or a solicitor immediately. And you need one then that can pick that up and run with that day. That's going to respond to the urgency.
Do you ever have someone come in the 11th hour and settlement's, a few days away, and they're like, oh, we need someone to do this. We didn't realize we needed a conveyancer. Maybe
not towards settlement.
Yeah.
Because there's a few other steps.
There's some
I know. Thank goodness. I have had the clients that have gone to auction and purchased and then come back to me on Monday and be like, we got this house over the weekend. And I've got, okay, good. And then I'm looking through it. I'm like, you went to an auction? Yes. Yeah, we seen it. We really liked it. We seen it on Friday. We really liked it. We went to the auction and we've purchased it. And, my heart goes, oh dear, like what is it? Because we haven't read over it. We haven't, so I do get those. And that's where it's just that education beforehand. It's like, ideally you'd want your contract read over prior to an auction, possibly 2 weeks. That's your ideal time. That's what I advocate. 2 weeks. That's ideal.
2 weeks prior to an auction?
Yeah, because it gives you the time to do any searches on that property. Remember, when you're going to auction, you have to go ready.
Yeah.
So if you want 2 weeks cooling off period, you want 2 weeks before an auction. Because what if there's searches that you want to get, and you have to get them from council and they take 10 days? You're not having that time.
Auctions make it so
hard. They do. So many people don't like them.
So you're engaging the conveyancer. Now, you said one thing that you mentioned, which I thought about, was you said before the contracts, and then you talked about reviewing the contracts 2 weeks before. What are you looking for what are the sort of key things that you're looking for as a conveyancer when you're reviewing a contract?
Yeah, we have some key points that I can just shoot through now without giving out.
Yeah, great.
I just want to also say, if you are not a qualified solicitor or conveyancer, please don't
You shouldn't
try
be
to
doing
do
your own
your own
checks.
conveyancing. Please don't try. It
Yeah.
is litigious. There are a lot of tricks and traps that even experienced, kind of inexperienced conveyancing solicitors can fall into. So please don't try if it's not your specialty. But in terms of looking through the contract, what we're looking for is we speak to the client. So we look at, okay, this completion date is 3 months. Is that something that's suitable to you? No. Okay, we're going to need to get that changed. There's a tenant living in the property. Do you want to move in? Yes. Okay, we're going to need to get that changed. And that's, front page. So it is just like bang, bang, bang. Just things that you can yourself even go, I need that changed. I need that changed. We check out, obviously, the price is what the client agreed. Then we're going through the contract. Now, we know the standard conditions off by heart. That's our job. So we're not really reading those because we know them. So we go to the special conditions and we look at what standard conditions they have changed.
Yep.
And whether that's okay, and whether there's any, because some of them don't apply all the time. So whether there's any real implication to the client. And then we go through and we look for the release of deposit condition. I know that's a big bane in everybody's side. Then we also look for anything that may have been disclosed in terms of unapproved works, special levies being raised, if it's a strata unit, anything else in that regard. So that's what we look for in the contract. Then we pull out easements, restrictions, make sure the client's aware of those. Going through to the planning certificate from council, we're looking for, flood prone, bushfire, anything else that may be, that's a new one. So because we see contracts every day, anything different stands out. It's like highlighted for us, or for my eyes anyway. It's like, oh, hang on, that's very different. So it's very quick for us to be able to tell that.
Some of them might be issues that the purchaser is going to say, oh my goodness, I didn't know that. We can't rely on the real estate agent to, disclose absolutely everything. And so some of those are going to be issues, but some of them might just be, they need to know. It might not be an issue, but it's, hey, you're about to get in a bunch of debt. You're about to get a massive mortgage. You're about to buy this asset, as an investment or an owner occupied. You need to at least be aware that there's, these type of conditions. Yeah. I think people get so involved in the purchase process. They get so excited. And it's quite an emotive process as well, that they're happy to just go overlook the issues. I also know, and bless their hearts, I know real estate agents tend to be very good on a personal note with buyers, to the point where sometimes the buyers feel like the real estate agent's got their best interest at heart. I was thinking about broker's best interest duty, but they have the best interest at heart.
Yeah.
And they might be the best person on the planet, but at the end of the day, you need someone really batting for you. You need someone on your side, and not to completely rely on what the real estate agent's saying.
It's so common because they build this, and that is their job, and that's why they do it well, is to build that rapport. And the idea is the real estate agent is always acting for the vendor, not for the purchaser. The other key element to understand is that they don't have a legal background. So for them to, they could disclose something and you go, yes, I know, but you don't understand the legal implications of being told that information, because they're not qualified to give the advice.
Yeah.
So they might say, this is the effect, this is what this means. And you go, okay, I understand that, but you didn't get the opportunity to hear legally what that means and legally where that puts you. So it's very important to go, okay, now I need to get my legal advice on it. And it's really subjective. It's really interesting that you brought that up, because conveyancing is emotive. So some of the issues are subjective, and this is what I'm always saying to clients. What I think may be an issue in terms of living there, you might be okay with. So unapproved works is a really big one. So for me, I'll be like, no. And again, because I understand the legal effect of that, and that's the advice I give. But it's subjective. I'm not paying the money. I'm not going to live there.
Mm-hmm.
Client may come along, they read the advice and they go, okay, I understand that. If that happens, then I understand that this is what can happen.
What could happen,
What
yeah.
could happen. And I'm okay with that. I'm moving forward anyway. Amazing. I've done my job in telling you that that's the case. Like, I'm not trying to be the bearer of bad news.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to say this is the legal position on all of these things.
Can I ask about unapproved works? Because you brought it up, and there are certain areas of Sydney, Greater Sydney, New South Wales, that are very, very common for unapproved works. I think maybe there was a time, maybe in the 90s, where maybe people went great guns on granny flats and like extensions and things like this. And maybe council didn't sort of bat an eyelid, but technically they're not approved. So, what are the? I'm not going to ask you should you or should you not, but I will ask you, what are the risks of, a common one that I see is a house at the front and a granny flat out the back, or a second dwelling out the back that's unapproved, and for an investor, that looks great. You got two incomes, you got someone out the back, rental yield's great. They're going to pay off their mortgage in 10 years. It's looking awesome. So
dreamy.
So yeah. So what would you tell someone as far as the risks associated if they said, no, I want to go ahead and buy this, I know it's unapproved? What are those risks?
Okay. There's a few other ones, but I will just pose this question in terms of a big one is insurance.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So if you have, and it may or may not be covered, more generally, I think you would find that if you disclosed it, it may not be covered because it's not approved, and they don't know what it looks like. So again, chat to your insurer once it's disclosed. How would you feel if it was being rented out? Something happened, worst case, someone died. It's not insured. Your dreamy 10-year plan of having your mortgage pays off turns into a lifetime of debt because you become personally responsible because it's not insured. If it's not insured. So my question would go back and be like, you need to chat to your insurer about the level. Again, if it's just a pergola or something like that, you still have this risk. But if it is a dwelling, particularly the biggest one I see is when they just take the stove out and then it's approved because they've approved it for, a cabana or something not to be lived in, and then they go and put the oven in and the stove, and then they go, okay, now they have someone living in it, and they go, but it's approved. Chat to your insurer because it does not take away this. And we all know that insurance companies look for anything
to not pay out
the policy, right? So that would be my biggest thing, is just like maybe pop that in your mind instead. So we can give you the legal advice, and we'll, it's a lot. I've got at least a page and a half of all these things that we need to be really mindful of. My biggest one is that, though, because clients often go, yes, okay, I know all this. I'm okay with that. In terms of, like breaking the law or whatever, or the council can't come and enforce it and stuff like that. And it's like, okay, if you're okay with that, I need you to definitely talk to your insurance company, because that may change your position. It may. Or the insurance company say, we might cover it up to this amount. At the end of the day, it is subjective. You have to satisfy yourself. You are the ones that are going to ultimately be responsible for it.
Yeah. No, that's good advice. It's something, like I said, certain areas are definitely more prone to that than not. And I can see. I feel like I shouldn't say the area, but there's
I think I know the area.
I think you might know.
Happens to a lot.
Yeah, and it's sort of like I always have those questions arise. But now we talked a little bit earlier about timing and how timing's really important. But there are circumstances where timing doesn't happen in time, and that can be very stressful on everyone involved, even the professionals. It can be very stressful for us trying to get a deal across the line and help a customer out when there's a timeline to get things done. What is the most what is the most common reason that you see for delays in settlement and delays in sort of unconditional contracts? And how can we sort of avoid them? How can we sort of go into the property transaction with that in the forefront of our mind, so we can have a nice, smooth, easy process?
Yes, have an amazing broker.
Good.
Please work with a broker. One of the major reasons that settlements don't happen is because your bank isn't ready.
It's the finance.
It's finance, and little things that may go wrong along the way, because if you go directly to a bank, maybe no one's monitoring your file. So if you have not given a document that the bank needs for settlement, there's no one there going, hey, you might have forgotten this.
Quickly,
and so like 2 days before settlement, we'll get a notification. We'll go, okay, why aren't you ready? And we might get told. And then it's like, okay, now we're backpedaling. So when you work with a broker, I find most of our settlements, there's nothing wrong. Nothing goes wrong because they're in the background and they're managing the banks for us.
Yep.
And so we don't have to manage the banks, because it's a bane for us to manage the banks, because we're just going through the usual lines where brokers have their contacts and their BDMs, and they know the process. It's difficult for us. We're just calling a line. We might wait on hold for 45 minutes. We speak to somebody that it's a whole thing. So
I didn't even think about that. Even as a broker, I didn't think about that, because you're right. There are some things that will come up, and we know that it was approved subject. So there's subjects to formal approval, but once you're formally approved, there's subject to settlement. Now, ideally, you want nothing subject to settlement. You want settlement to just be completely unconditionally approved, but that's not always the case. Sometimes subject to settlement is it could be like a sale of the property or confirmation that something's been paid off, like an ATO debt or something like this. So the lender can put sort of any of those settlement conditions on there. And I can imagine at a bank, if you've got a settlement condition that you probably don't have anyone, the bank has probably moved on to the next file, and they go, oh, this is settling in 2 weeks and we've got all the documents and all, that's fine. And it might come to the day before, and you might get a nice little PEXA message saying, actually, we haven't got this random document that we require for a settlement condition.
And that's probably going to be the first time, because we can't see that. We can't see the conditions of your loan approval.
Yeah,
so if it does say subject to, you have to pay out this credit card, you have to sell your property, you have to pay out your ATO debt, as a conveyancer, as your legal representative, whether it's a conveyancer or a solicitor, we aren't privy to that information. So the first time we're going to see or going to be notified is when we tap the bank on the shoulder and be like, are you ready for our settlement in a week or in 2 days? And they go, oh, no, we're waiting on this. And you're like, oh, dear. Okay, I wonder if the client knows that. And sometimes they do. If they have a broker, they do. They're like, oh, we're working on it. It's going to be here. The brokers are usually all over it. And if they don't, then they've got to go back to the bank to understand what it is that's happening, and then come back. And so conveyancing is managing timelines, managing the deadlines. And so we have an entire procedure and system that does that. And we just find that when we work with the broker, we can tick those boxes a lot quickly.
Makes it a lot quicker.
A lot more quicker, because it's like, we know that's one section that we know is going to be handled correctly.
So if I'm a customer, and because things come up, most of them usually are quite smooth and they go through okay. But then there are some ones where the bank's delaying. Maybe there's a discharge that's 4 weeks out. We need settlement or formal approval by X date. What if I'm the customer and I know that unconditional approval is required on tomorrow, and it's not happening, but they obviously still want to purchase this property. The buyer still wants them to purchase the property. What's that procedure like? Is there what's involved?
There is one. So under that cooling off period, or if it's not, just before you have to exchange, that is the most intense time for the client. That journey, I feel, is when they've got this impending date that they know they need, and they're unfamiliar with the process, and it's the most stressful time for them, just waiting for this approval. So we often say, look, first of all, this isn't unusual to not have it yet. It could come down to on the day, like you get it on the day. I like to request an extension 2 days before. So what I do is I keep up with the mortgage broker, if there is one. If there's not, it's like the bank. I just get the bank to kind of give an estimate, which is difficult, so I do it. But if the broker says, no, it's definitely going to come through 5 o'clock tonight and we call off tomorrow, good, I'm not asking for one, because it's probably going to come through before lunch the next day.
Yeah.
Or overnight. And again, that's a broker that I've worked alongside. It's that trusted relationship where we go, okay, I know their word is good. I'm okay with that. So I say to the clients, look, let's wait until 48 hours before the end of the call off and see what position you're in at that stage. And if it's necessary, we can request an extension of the cooling off period for the number of days that we need. It's not a blanket. Hey, we're going to need a free. I don't do that. I know that the other firms might, or they might panic or whatever. I like to be on top of it. So I might go, if we need 2 days, I'm only asking for what we need.
Okay. Yeah.
If I ever send a request for a cooling off period extension at the start, because it may be for 5 days, and the broker has said there is no way that I'm going to get this to you in 5 days because of this, and this. We've got to wait for this. The client hasn't done that. We're waiting for this to come through. I'm like, okay, we're clearly going to need 10 days. I may as well do it now. And then we'll sit in this position, again, the 48 hours before the end of the extension and find out where we're at.
Yeah, gotcha.
That relies heavily, though, on the vendors agreeing.
Yeah, okay. I was about to ask that. So what is that process of requesting an extension? What's that in practice? Like you message their solicitor or conveyancer and you sort of say,
this is what's happening.
This is what's happening. Okay.
Accordingly, we're going to need an extension.
Do you give a full description? Like, do you sort of say, hey, these are all the things, or do you just go, hey guys, we need an extension?
With that permission. So it depends on how much the client wants to close. Yeah. But I do find that the more transparent you are with the reasoning, the more likely you get a positive response. Yeah. So if the client's happy and I say, look, are you happy for me to let the vendors know this information? Is this something that you're happy for me to know? Yeah. Or can you just maybe say this? Because I don't want them to think that I can't get finance. And that's the biggest thing, because a vendor may not understand and they may read all this and go, oh, it sounds too hard. But I advise my vendors, look, this is pretty standard. Like I can understand as a purchaser, you're going to go through this. You're going to understand that it might be that they can't not get finance. It's just that this is the process that's taking that long. Yeah. So it depends on the situation as to how much information we do disclose whilst asking for that extension.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Now, what about delays to settlement? So what does that look like? Now, the delay to settlement is usually at that time you usually have unconditional approval. So you've got hopefully you got unconditional approval. And again, maybe it's a discharge that we're waiting for from someone. Sometimes it's a second mortgage, especially first-time buyers using guarantors. It could be a few other reasons, but there is the bank is not making settlement on tomorrow when it's due. And it might be another, call it 5 days before they might be ready. What does that look like as far as a process, and what does that mean for the customer or the purchaser?
Very, very.
I know.
It is a breach of the contract to not meet the settlement date. It's interesting that you raise that guarantor thing, because that is something that we have come across. Again, that's something that we can't see in our lane. And it does.
I'll have to say that's probably if any. We don't have many delayed settlements, thank goodness. but there has the few occasions we have is always a second mortgage, because they give you an unconditional approval before the second mortgage, right? So anyway,
it's such a surprise the day, kind of like because we ask the bank, we're okay, you haven't accepted the settlement date and time, what's going on? And this is possibly a week out, 3 days out, and it's around that 3-day mark that we kind of get told that there is this other transaction that we can't see, we have no control over, that is now hindering the settlement being affected on our matter. And so again, it's a matter of contacting the client. It is a breach of contract to not meet the settlement date, regardless of some of the information or misinformation that is floating around. There are penalty clauses in the contract, which we advise our clients as part of our contract review.
And that's usually like a daily interest charge.
It's a daily interest.
Yeah. What is that? What is
legal fees? Depending on the purchase price, it could be anywhere between 8 to 12% of the purchase price, calculated on a daily rate.
Can you sort of sit there and go, "Oh, look, it's 5 days away. I'll just pay the penalty interest," or is there more to it than that?
If the client wanted to do that, if that's a pill they were swallowing and they're happy to do that, then yes, that's something we can do, and we can sit and wait, and they've accepted that that's the consequences. There's a 14-day, if the other side serves something called a notice to complete. And I don't want to get into too much jargon because I want to keep it interesting. But this document essentially makes the contract time of the essence. And it gives a 10 business day or 14-day period once served for a purchaser to settle. If you can't make settlement in that time, the vendor could at that time terminate the contract. You then lose your deposit. You forfeit that. You kiss that goodbye. You have to pay all the penalties still. And this is a standard contract as well. Obviously, it differs, but I'm just saying, like, generalizing, this is the scope this is the area that we're navigating into. It's a big storm. So you're happy to do that. You could risk your deposit. And if the vendor, in the event, this is not a big one now, but it was a really long time ago, in the event that the vendor can't sell the property for the same or more, you risk them suing you for any difference in the sale price when they do. And we can't stop that. That's something that you're just going to wear until you know it's sold eventually for whatever the price. But you do open yourself up to litigation, I think, at the bottom of the day. Like, at the end of the day, that's the bottom line. You open yourself up to litigation. You're paying penalty interest. It's not the ideal spot, which is why we all go, okay, let's brace ourselves. Let's, batten down the hatches. What are we doing here? How do we keep them safe?
Gee, what a horrible situation. But so to clarify, let's say you can't make settlement and the vendor goes, "That's it. This has been a painful process. I don't want to sell to this buyer anymore. I'm done." Now they haven't made settlement and it's day 2. Do they still have to give that notice to complete though, right?
Yes, they do.
Okay, so you do have, with penalty interest, I assume, you do have some at least a 14-day moment of the vendor sort of saying you need to do it now, or we are definitely terminating. And not that people should venture into that territory, but it's good to know. Especially, it's good to know because I should
also say it's terminate or sue you for specific performance.
Right. Yeah.
But if they're going to sue you and they know that it's just your bank, it doesn't make sense for them to go all the way and spend all that money if we're just waiting a few more days and you'll get your loan, like the bank's going to come through for you. So
So that's okay. All right, that's interesting because you do have that moment where people sort of say, if I don't make settlement, I'm going to lose this transaction. But if the bank is a couple of days away and it's a moment of just waiting for something to come through, there is some penalty which hopefully can be avoided by making it on time. But otherwise, they're not going to just pull the property out and resell it to the next person the next day.
No, it doesn't happen.
Okay. All right. That's cool. Well, that's good to know, especially because that is a very anxious moment. And again, it doesn't happen that often. Obviously, that finance period or that cooling off period is probably the most you've got the most anxiety in as a purchaser, then settlement. But it is good to know what the actual options are should you get to that. Now, if you do you see when it comes to like mistakes, I was going to ask you about like what are common mistakes, but because you're going to engage a conveyancer early, I'd assume that would probably be number one mistake is not engaging a conveyancer.
Yeah.
But are there things that people that you see people maybe don't during the process or finding a property or going to auctions or something that can make your job a little bit easier if they maybe took certain precautions or looked at something first or took certain steps, or is it just a matter of get a conveyancer and everything will be fine?
Yeah, I was thinking about this when I looked at your question actually, because I was like, mistakes. I wouldn't want to call them mistakes because it's not the client's realm. Like it would be like me trying to drive a excavator. I would probably make a lot of mistakes. I don't know how to do it. So I can see some kind of, I think the biggest kind of, I guess it'd be like a misunderstanding or that naivety when you walk into something that you don't know is that purchasers do happen to make a very good relationship with the real estate agent, which can be really, really good in terms of rapport moving forward. If you do need that grace for a few days for the extension, it can be great there. Where it gets a little dangerous is where they do just take their word for it in terms of certain issues. That can be dangerous, and I would just be wary. And again, we'd go back to them just saying, look, just understand it's their job to sell that property, and all real estate agents do that really well. I have great relationships with real estate agents, so this isn't a knock at them. I respect highly what they do. From our perspective, it doesn't have that legal background. So when you can work hand in hand with your conveyancer and your real estate agent, and they're on the same side, it's going to make an easy process for you to go forward because everybody's on the same page.
It is hard when you're so excited, and I get this mainly with first home buyers is that when they find a property, often, and you know what the market's like at the moment, they're sitting on an approval for at least a couple of months going every week. Sometimes we have to renew that pre-approval just so they can keep looking for a property. And they finally find something that ticks all their boxes, and there's an issue with it. And it's so easy for these customers to just go, or these purchasers to sort of say, oh, that's all right. Maybe it's not that big of an issue because I don't want to go back out looking for another property. It's hard to say. It's hard to let that go,
Absolutely. I've been there. It's not that we haven't done that. You've probably been there. I've been a purchaser. I looked at 20 properties in one day once. And then you go and you finally find this property, and I've done it, and I'm a conveyancer. Yeah. And I've done that emotion where I'm like, oh, this is it. I don't care anymore. Whatever it is, I'm going with it.
Yeah.
I don't care.
It could have a whole living room floor.
Yeah, and then we got the pest and building report, and there was something wrong with the roof, and I was kind of like, oh dear, I don't want to start again. Like, this is exhausting. I'm exhausted. But I promise you that spending that money on a pest and building report, looking through the contract is going to save you so much money in the future. Like you can't, if you at this moment, it's okay because you're exhausted, but this is just a moment in your life. It's just a tiny time. And I know that it's exhausting and hard now, but you're going to own this, like you're going to have this mortgage or live in this property for a long time. Is it going to be the same in 18 months, in 10 years? Yeah. That's when you're going to go, oh, I wish I didn't do that.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
So like ticking the boxes now and making sure that regardless of the situation, you do look at it for something that, will this bother me in 2 years? Yes, it doesn't bother you now because I know you've been on this exhausting journey and you just want to stop and rest. And I get that. But are you going to feel this way in 6 months when you've got a leak in the roof and you've got to fix this? Or are you going to feel this way when you're getting the approval from council, and they tell you that they're going to fine you for a certain amount of money, and then you've got to spend all this thing. This is okay now because you're exhausted, but will it be okay when you actually have to resolve
When you
this
sat down and you've lived there for a bit and it's no longer emotive, it's more, I
every
get that.
day? It's becoming your everyday, because I've even had clients with strata. They came and it was a really good deal. It was a really good deal, and
Yeah.
I kind of went, this is too good to be true. Let's have a look. And the strata was in bit of a problem in terms of it was almost going to be condemned by council because it didn't have a fire system in it. It was a thing.
I had a client just recently. The exact same thing happened. Yeah.
Could be the same complex. I remember where it sits, so I can say to other clients, nope, this deal is definitely too good to be true. But the client was like, it's okay because we're saving $300,000 or saving $400,000 on the purchase price. So I've got that money to pay this special levy, to pay these things. I was like, oh, is it okay?
Yeah.
We don't know how long this is going to take.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
more specifically, if this is not right, and the council come along and go, you can't live here anymore. There's bigger things that could be at play that they weren't focusing on. They were focused on this really good deal. And unfortunately, in Sydney market, if it's a really good deal, that's probably something wrong with the property.
It's too good. Too good to be true.
Too good to be true is definitely true in the Sydney property market anyway. Unless, of course, you have a buyer's agent. I mean, their sole job is to find these really goods. But if you're doing this on your own, you found this property that's too good to be true, it possibly is going to be. So it was just interesting that they made their focus. And again, it's not our job to tell them what to do. That's not what I was doing. I wasn't like saying you shouldn't buy this property.
Yeah.
But I was saying there are these other key
Here
things
are the
for your
issues. Yeah.
It was very big. They got to other professionals involved because there was also litigation going on, and
with the strata.
With the strata, it was, and I said it's more your stress as well. Like you're going to live in this complex and have this stress of knowing that this is going on for how long.
Question in relation to that. So strata is having a legal dispute with, tenant B based on an issue with tenant B's property. You're going to be tenant A and you're going to be living in a different property, but same strata complex. Mm-hmm. No issue with your property, but there's a big legal dispute. I've heard, and I haven't really sort of dug into the details of it, but I heard that can be a big problem for even purchaser A or tenant A. What is the problem? What is the risk in that situation?
With strata, you have to, again, I'm using metaphors very simply. There's a lot more involved. I always feel like if professionals listen to this and they're like, oh, she didn't say this and she's not that and that's wrong. Of course, there's a lot more involved. And I know the lot more involved. And to clients, I liken it to buying shares in a property, in a company. Sorry, if you're buying shares in a company, so you're buying a bit of the strata. You're a little bit responsible for the strata.
You're involved.
So you're involved in it. Yeah, there's nothing. That's why you pay your levies, and the strata then pays for the complex. So even though your unit may not be damaged or going through a legal dispute, the money's got to come from somewhere to pay, and it comes from your share, everybody's share.
Yeah.
So everybody pays a little bit into the bucket. So if one particular unit or there is legal action that the strata is taking, it may mean that you're going to get special levies because you're responsible. That's what you're buying into. That's the reason why, one of the reasons why we always recommend a strata report for strata properties. The amount of times that people have said to me, oh no, it doesn't matter, it's run well. Okay. Can you show me some information on how, just so we know, just so I can see what you've looked through on how you know it's run well? Oh, the real estate agent said. Okay, that's cool. Could you get me the information that the real estate agent has to know that it's run well? So let's have a look at some information. Let's have a look at some documents, some writing, something formal, some authority as to how this is run, because we're looking at if it is, we're looking at disputes, we're looking at harmony, we're looking at maintenance, anything that might come up in the future. because you don't want to buy into something that's going to have, $25,000 worth of special levies.
I think not enough people get strata reports because it's not required. You can buy a property without getting one. It's not like
same as pest and building.
Same as pest and building. And I find people buying units, especially in Sydney, don't get those strata reports. And only recently I've seen a few people get, maybe they're some of the clients that we're working together on, but I've seen a few people get some strata reports recently, and it has disclosed some things that's important to note. And it's good, those reports. Same with pest and building. Those reports are really good. Sometimes they can be daunting. And I remember when we purchased our first property, we had the same thing. We got a pest and building, and we felt the world was going to end. Like
same.
And it's funny. We called up the pest and building guy, and we say, it's pretty damning, some of the stuff you said. And he goes, it's not that bad. It's pretty standard stuff.
Yes.
And I'm like, he's like, I have to put in the report and stuff like this. And I'm like, okay. So it's not a problem. He's like, yeah. He's like, it'll be nice if it got repaired, but it's not going to cost that much and blah, blah, blah. And so sometimes those reports can be confronting, especially if you're an anxious buyer, which I definitely was when I purchased my first home. Can I rewind back to settlement delays? There was one question that I was really eager to ask you on. And this one I really don't know the answer to, and it's never happened. So I've never had a client where this has happened on.
I hope I do.
Hopefully, but I assume you know the answer. And that is when you do pre-settlement inspection. Okay. So you do a pre-settlement inspection, and previously there was no hole in the wall, and you go in there and now there's a hole in the wall. Because actually I do know a story. Not my client, but I had someone, another broker who the tenants were getting kicked out because they were buying it as an owner occupied. So they gave them notice to leave so that the new purchasers can move into the property, right? And these new purchasers were working with this other broker that I knew. And the tenants weren't happy, and there was a dispute between the tenant and the landlord and stuff like this. So when they left, they trashed the place, and they got upset. They trashed the place and they left. And pre-settlement inspection, which was, I think they did it 2 days prior. I know some people have different ideas. You should do it the day before, the morning of, or something like that. But they did it a couple of days prior, and there was all this drama with the property. Now, I don't actually know what happened. I just know that story. What happens in that situation where you've got you're contractually obligated to settle in the next couple of days, yet the property is not in the same condition as it was when you signed the contract? What's your options?
There are a few. So first of all, it comes back to what has gone wrong on that final inspection and how significant it is. So there is a multitude of case law to help us guide as to, for us as professionals, to help us get a gauge on what is and isn't significant in terms of how we then advise our clients to move forward. Because whilst you have to settle, whilst you have an obligation to settle, the vendor has an obligation to give you the property in the condition it was as inspected or when you signed, all right? So they have that obligation. So in this situation, in the situation you've just given, clearly the property is nowhere near the condition it was when they entered into the contract. So that would be an interesting one to navigate out.
Yeah. Right.
You would be relying on it depends on what the client wanted to do and how. So we have had situations where there was a fire, there was a storm and a tree fell down. Now, both of those things, whilst our clients could have taken the option to exit out of the contract and get their deposit back because the conditions of the property had changed significantly, much the same as what this one might have been. I don't want to comment too much because I don't know full details of it.
I don't know the full details.
If it's like significant changes, then you can walk away because the property is no longer in the condition you contracted to buy it in, and you're entitled to your deposit back. That's an option under certain circumstances. So whilst our clients did have this option, because there was no kitchen, and then there was no carport, the tree had fallen, they negotiated with the vendor to use insurance to cover it, have it fixed, and we settled. They just waited, and we settled, and everything was.
So you waited until insurance sorted out first and then settled?
Yes,
okay.
Yes, until the clients were comfortable and that they were happy. Always reserving our right to walk away if that fell away.
Yeah,
Take away your right to go. No, thank you. So there's ways to navigate around depending on the significant. They are significant. That was the example you've given. Those two examples, that's kind of almost cut and dry. The more tedious ones we get, I would say, is when it's something smaller value in terms of that may or may not be in the contract, inclusions that may not have been left behind, or things that have been left behind that were not exclusions, and the vendor's like, well, I don't want them. I didn't think I'd have to leave. And the purchaser comes along to put their stuff in, and they go, well, I don't want them, and I don't want the cost of removing them. That gets a little more tedious to navigate through, because we aren't talking about great sums of money. It's an inconvenience, and absolutely the contracts, it can get tedious. So it depends on what it is. Sometimes what we do is say, okay, we come to an agreement where the real estate agent may hold a certain sum of money until the vendor has done this stuff. The vendor agrees, the vendor does the stuff, we give the money back, settlements not affected. Everybody's happy. So at that time, it's like the brakes come up, you pull the handbrake up, you're like, right, roll, stop. We've all got to figure out what's happening before we can move forward. So it depends on where the breach is. So if it's a vendor breach or purchaser breach. Bank, anything on your side, like your bank, definitely purchaser breach, and we've got to do whatever we can to make sure that doesn't happen. If it's a vendor breach, the impending settlement date, that kind of like, okay, we can relax a little bit, because if they haven't done what they're supposed to do in the contract, they can't enforce us to settle on that date, generally speaking. So you can kind of sit, get your bearings, and then go, okay, this is how we're going to proceed forward. It also blows out costs. That's the other thing. Because conveyancing, we usually have a set fee. Everybody has a set of fees. Things like that are usually fall out of scope for solicitors and conveyancers, because they're things that we don't often, they're not factored into. Because it's like, how long is a piece of string? It might take 2 emails. It might take 40 and 3 days. So it's hard to factor in what is actually going to happen. So clients are also then going, okay, it's going to cost me this much extra to possibly get this, and they weigh up whether it's, but it's only going to cost me this much to remove it.
Gotcha. So
there's also that kind of, we just have to sit down and go, like, realistically, what are we talking about?
Sometimes it's all about timing too. Like some people have terminated their tenancy agreement and they're expecting to move in, and they don't.
And we're talking about pot plants on a front veranda, and you're like,
you just like,
how much are you paying your removalist waiting whilst we send and paying us? It's kind of like, we need to be a little bit real here. Is this something? I'll jump along. That's my job. I'm here for you. I will jump alongside you and I will ride this. Like I'm going.
You tell me what to do and I'll do it.
Tell me, but we just need to have a little debrief here. Is this something that's really economical? Is this something that you definitely want to do? You can engage your clients too, because some people are just headstrong and you're like, I'm not going to get through here. Like I just know. I'm like, we are going. I have to be a warrior. I have to do it.
I did see a Judge Judy episode the other day. I love Judge Judy, and she and the guy owed $30. The whole thing was based on a $30 thing, and Judge Judy said, "I don't think you owe it. I don't think you owe the money, basically. But if you don't, I know she's going to take you back to court." Because apparently she had a right to appeal or something like that. So she's like, she's just going to take you back to court. So you don't owe the money. So she's like, why don't you just pay the $30 and move on with your life? And he goes, no. and so it just starts and some people are like that. And that's
it's on principle. And I get it. That's what I was like, on principle, if you, I will hey, I'll buckle up. I'm in for the ride. Like we'll ride out this principle. But I do always have that little debrief, like is this something, because I let you know this is now out of scope. This is the costs. You've got all the information that you need, because I often say go and get quotes.
Yeah.
Because it's going to be hard for us to negotiate prices if you haven't got quotes.
If you don't even know what it costs.
What you're doing. We can't say it's going to cost $1,000, but then they go and ring one person and it's going to cost $500. We're going to get a no straight away, and then we lose that. They think that we're just,
mucking around.
So, so I go get quotes. Okay, so now how much this is going to cost to fix, remove, repair, whatever it is. You've got your removals if they're moving in. That's because the timing in terms of whether we have to settle, that's another thing, because if it's not that significant, chances are we're probably going to have to settle. So you're going to have the penalty interest. You're going to have this. If we pop all that together, is this something that's you want to stick to your principles on?
Yeah.
And I know it's hard to swallow, and it's not going to leave the best taste in your mouth from the experience, but I'm hoping it's just a blip in your journey. Like, is this something that we can get around? And majority of the time, when you've done that and you let them process that, it's going to be okay. Let's just settle it. I can't be bothered.
Yeah, let's just get it over and done with.
Because everyone's stressed at that time. You've got to think, like, moving is hard. You've moved. I've moved. You're doing so much. There's so many other moving parts. You're thinking all these things. You've just packed up. So that's where they're at. They're like, there's a lot. We're here seeing things objectively and rationally. That's our job. So let's help you.
It must be hard as a conveyancer, because you probably get both sides of the spectrum with customers, where you get like the customers who are like, that was such a tense, tricky situation, and if it wasn't for Judy, we wouldn't have made it through, and like we'll worship the ground she walks on. But then on the flip side, you have the people who, the pot plants weren't removed, and so now I'm ticked and I have to now pay someone to get rid of that, and blah blah blah. And it does put conveyancers in a tricky spot, because it's such an emotional transaction, it's such an emotional thing, and so to be able to navigate that like you do, and obviously have the customer feedback that you have, truly sort of attests to your service, which is really, really good. Now, I have noticed the time. I've got so many more questions to ask, but
maybe we'll do another one.
We'll have to do another one another time. But look, I thank you so much for jumping on the podcast. Let me know if there's anything that we can do, and we'll have to have you back on in the future.
Amazing. Pleasure. Awesome. Absolute pleasure to do this. Thank you so much for your time.